This is the part that always makes me nervous. Like, is it gonna work? All right. Okay. I think it's going. So I am going to come back to our meeting here. I'm going to share my screen one more time, and then we are going to get started. So again, welcome everybody. One more time, I'm going to put these links in the chat. These are links to all the things we're going to need tonight. There's this slideshow that I'm showing right now. There's the Google form we're going to look at later, and there's a yearbook thing. But if you just want to listen to us, that's fine too. So welcome. Folks are still coming in. Dr. Wood is letting folks in as we get started. Tonight's meeting got moved up a little bit. Last time we were together last week, I said, yeah, we'll talk in about 2 weeks. We'll definitely be ready to talk about hybrid then. Yeah, well.
Surprise, it was a little earlier.
It's 2020. When do things go according to plan? I tried hard. I'm like, Dr. Wood, please, can't it just wait? He's like, no, it can't. Okay. So I have a couple of little updates for you, kind of where we're at on distance learning, a few like things that are coming on board that I think will be helpful. And then we're going to talk a little bit about hybrid and the survey that went out on Monday and just sort of what's going on in the world. I'm going to be honest, there will be no definitive answers tonight. I just want to say that up front. There will be no definitive answers. Tonight is really both about kind of sharing some information, but also about getting input from you. And that's really our focus. So with that, so like I said, we're going to talk about some updates to distance learning, some updates to parent supports. I think I made that slide that I put in place, and then our hybrid planning. So updates first. I got a few things on here. So since we were last together talking about our distance learning plan, we've actually done it now for like 6 whole weeks, and the mid-trimester was this week, and I think that was really surprising to all of us. We're like, okay, it's a 1/6 of the way through the year. That's not insignificant. And while there have been hiccups, I think overall it's gone very well. We've added a few things, so especially in response to the feedback you guys gave us at the end of August. So we added some social times. They are still screen-based social times, but now every day at lunch, if your kiddo wants to jump on the Zoom at lunch, there's just like kids hanging out and chatting, mostly chatting with our campus monitors, but they can also, join with their friends and get put in a breakout room and just kind of have some chat time with their friends. Similarly, at the end of the week, we have Popcorn Fridays, which we used to have at school in person, and now it's pop your own popcorn and sit and chat. And they're really just, both of those times are, I just want to talk to somebody that's not my mom. And it's an opportunity to do that. And they're both, all of those links are in the kids' Google calendars, and they can access them at any time. We've got our virtual math club up and running, and we've got a number of folks doing that. We're kind of using it as a practice for other clubs. I will say to anyone listening, that club is working because we have a parent who's taking a very large role in it. So if you're really excited about running a virtual club, you know who to talk to. And this week in the mail, we finally finished all of our iReady diagnostic testing. So this week in the mail, like actual physical mail on paper, in an envelope. We're going to put some iReady reports in the mail to you this week, so you can get an update on kind of how your kid's doing and how they've, what growth they've made since last year. And I will tell you, I'm very impressed with our kids. They really took iReady seriously this year and actually showed quite a bit of growth, a lot of them. So, that's pretty cool. Coming up after fall break, because we're a week and a half away from fall break, which might be terrifying to parents, but is a little bit of a breath of fresh air for some of us who really need a break. And some of you know that I have a brand new niece. I get to go see my brand new niece, so that's pretty exciting for me. We're going to do some really tiny adjustments to the schedule. You're not going to see any changes to the beginning or end of the day, but we're just adjusting to have a slightly longer lunch and just a little bit of space in the day. these adjustments are coming again based on the feedback we got both from you and from kids and from teachers. They just needed a little bit more breathing room in the day, so making a few adjustments, maybe some more adjustments based on our hybrid conversation today, but that's sort of the plan right now, just minor, and those will be sent out to you before the end of break. And then we're also finally going to start with Learning Lab and our targeted lessons. And what we've been doing is just very general stuff right now in Learning Lab, but we're going to start having small group. Okay, these kids all need this skill, and we're going to work on it with them for short periods of time. We've got some fun stuff planned for that. So when you get that iReady report, I think it'll give you a sense of, okay, this is what my kid's going to be working on. And we're excited to roll that out. Also in the works, Mr. Shane and I are meeting tomorrow to figure out how we can get, Mr. Shane and I are meeting tomorrow to figure out how we can get some sports conditioning happening. Like they wouldn't condition together, they would condition separately, but then they'd come back and report on their conditioning and just sort of get those kids that know they want to, stay in athletics once we can get back to sports, getting them a little ready for that, giving them that connection point. Ms. Meindl and her leadership team are working on a school spirit week that will be a virtual spirit week that'll come in October. And somehow or another, we are going to do school pictures. Ms. Babayev is working with a photographer to work on that. We think there'll probably be some version of like drive-through. We haven't quite figured it out, but those are in the works. So we're trying to make sure we pull in a few of those semblances of normalcy. Any like burning questions about any of those things you want to either put in the chat or unmute and ask? I'm practicing my wait time. Well, we can always come back to that. So then, speaking of pictures and yearbook, Ms. Babayev is our yearbook editor and yearbook coordinator, and we have students who are working on the yearbook with her. And of course, yearbook is going to look very different this year, but we are determined to have a yearbook of some sort, and we'll figure out what that looks like as we get closer. But she's asked that if this is something that you might be able to help us with, we would really appreciate it. So this link right here, and again, it's one of those links in the chat. And Dr. Wood, would you grab those links and pop them in the chat one more time?
Sure.
These are all things that if you have images or things to share about what your kids are doing at home in distance learning that are related to these topics, silver lining, staying connected, trends of life at home, or pets, these are fun things that we're hoping to feature in the yearbook. Of course, we can't come into your home and take pictures of your child doing these things. So if you happen to have a photo and can share it here, it would be really cool. And if you have questions about that, definitely I would say ask Ms. Babayev, because I haven't even looked at this yet because she gave it to me about 5 minutes before the meeting started, or by the time you guys ask the questions, I'll probably know more. But that's sort of what's going on with yearbook so far. And then, yay, I did. Okay. And then last but not least, we had talked at a couple of meetings, both the one last week and then a few weeks ago, about ways to support each other. And actually, if you got to be at our meeting last week, we had a really great conversation about just how hard it is to be a parent in this context and how challenging it is, especially for our new parents in our community. So we, based on your feedback, there's 2 tools that I will have up and running by the time we get back from fall break. One is this Phone a Friend, and I will, and that link is in the chat as well. And I sent it out via email. The Phone a Friend is like you sign up and you say, I want to be part of an 8th grade Phone a Friend group. And then I'm going to connect you with like 3 or 4 other 8th grade parents, and I'm going to give you guys each other's contact information because you're going to tell me in that form that that's okay. And then you have like a little group that you can call and you can text and you can reach out to when it's 10 o'clock at night and your kid is saying, but I don't know where to find that assignment in Schoology. And, you have some resources. I also had the request to start a little closed Facebook group for our leading edge families. I've said this to everyone, this makes me a little nervous, but I'm going to try it. This is me being brave. So we're going to try to get that up and running by the end of fall break as well. I'll continue to send out reminders to those. But I really encourage you, the same way we're encouraging our students, you know, reach out, try to find those connections, use these tools to find those connections. What we know is that if we're taking care of ourselves, if you put your oxygen mask on first, our students will both see that and learn from our modeling, but also just be in a better space because they're not going to be holding space for us, right? That's a very critical part of this. So just some supports that we have in the works. Any questions about any of those things? Questions, comments, excitements? You can chat them or you can share them. You can unmute. Or I'm just going to assume you guys are all saying, that's amazing. I'm so excited. All right. Yeah, Danielle gave me a thumbs up. Thanks, Danielle. All right, so moving on. We are going to start talking about planning for hybrid. And as you know, we sent out a survey on Monday. I'm just
Monday,
like,
right.
I think it was Monday. And then Dr. Wood sent it out again yesterday. I'm popping it in the chat right now so you can access that survey. And what Dr. Wood and I are going to do is we're going to go over a couple of elements of this survey that are, and a couple of elements of our planning right now for hybrid and what's going on in the world with planning for hybrid right now. And if you are so inclined and haven't yet filled out your survey, you could open up the survey and fill it out while we're talking, and that would not be a terrible thing. Oh, Ms. Melissa asked, would sports conditioning include volleyball on campus or just outside? These are great questions, Melissa, and as soon as I know the answers to them, I will tell you. I'm meeting with Mr. Shane tomorrow to figure that out.
Thank you.
Anyway, so I'm going to actually hand the reins over to Dr. Wood and let him talk through some pieces. And then, like I said, and then we'll talk through if you have any questions on the survey. And we're going to go through parts of the survey in this talk. So again, you can do them at the same time if you haven't already. With that,
You can be my clicker. Thank you.
I'm going to be your clicker.
All right. So, so as Mrs. Goldman brought up, really the point for tonight is just to provide you a little bit of context and background information for filling out the survey. We know as educators that we speak our own language. And then in the sense of COVID-19, it doesn't help that every school district that happens to be on the news has a different version of this word. So the goal tonight is to kind of just talk through how we're operationalizing and defining these words right now. That might change a little bit, partially based on your feedback, but this is what we're thinking at the moment. So just as a reminder, our goals for this year is to welcome students back to campus as soon as possible when it's safe to do so, welcome staff back as soon as possible, maintain consistency for all students and staff, provide a safe and healthy campus for the entire community, and kind of number 5 might actually be the hardest, reopen and stay open. And we're going to talk a little bit about why that might be challenging. Number 2 is actually pretty much accomplished right now. Most of our staff are working from campus at least a few days a week and kind of increasing the number of days that they're coming from campus. So we're going to transition to the next slide then. So where are we at on the reopening journey? So we have this thing called the county monitoring list, which was already kind of challenging to understand. And so the state has come up with a new color-coded model for how we get schools reopened. So they have this color-coded model. If you're familiar with the air quality index, it kind of looks like that, in that there's purple, red, orange, yellow. There's no green on this list because from the governor's office and from California Department of Public Health, the feeling is we won't be green, i.e. pre-COVID normal, until there is a vaccine or readily available treatment. So right now, Sacramento County is in the most restrictive tier. That's the widespread tier. And basically every Tuesday, there's an update on the data. When we get to having been in the red tier, which is the substantial tier, for 2 or more weeks, we can begin to talk about schools reopening at that point. So the data you see on your screen right there is just the historical data here in Sacramento County since this model was developed. So you can see the very first week, we were purple on both of the indicators, the number of cases in the community and the positivity rate. Then on the second week, on the 8th, we remained purple for number of cases, but our positivity rate actually got better. We went into that red or substantial zone. Same thing on the 15th, went down a little bit more. And then on the 22nd, went down a little bit more. And actually, in the positivity rate went down low enough that we are actually in the orange zone. So the idea is that we have to maintain this tier for at least 2 weeks before we can actually move into that tier. So we're still widespread, even though we had a week with some red and orange. So we got to be there for at least 2 weeks. And then the county has to be there for 2 more additional weeks before schools can even consider reopening. So if literally everything goes perfect, right now they're thinking schools might have the possibility in Sacramento County of opening on around October 19th. It's not mandatory for schools to open at that time. It's just when they would be first given the permission to potentially open. And that's all grade levels, TK through high school. When we do open, whenever that is, all schools still have to follow all the health and safety protocols. We're not talking about reopening to a 5-day model here where, it's sort of school as normal. We're talking about reopening to a hybrid model, 50% of kids on campus, everyone's wearing masks, that sort of thing. You should be aware, though, as you're looking at this data, we have some really significant headwinds ahead of us. None of this data reflects Labor Day weekend yet. And that is actually a really big concern of public health as to what degree is Labor Day weekend going to impact this data. There was probably a little bit of Labor Day infections in the most recent data pool, but it's really going to be next week. That's going to tell us a lot about the impacts of Labor Day weekend. Also, public health is very concerned around Thanksgiving and Christmas. When they look at their contact tracing records, what they're finding is that most of the time cases are being transmitted in households where people are coming together for family gatherings and not wearing their masks. So, the typical like going to grandma's house for Thanksgiving is a really bad idea for COVID. And as our public health doctor said to me, she said, we're not, as a community, we haven't been real good at the little holidays. So I'm a little concerned about the major holidays. So we're going to kind of have to see how that plays out. And then just generally, the public not following the protocols. And yes, Sandy, the bright side is that the air quality has been better. So at least hopefully people were outside, not gathering in the house with their masks on. So anyway, so that's kind of where we're at on the reopening journey. So really, the big thing I need you to know as parents right now is that hybrid is a real potential in the next few months. And so we're really trying to gear up for it. I know some people are like, oh, we're not going to do hybrid at all this year, or it won't be till January. It could be sooner than that. And we're trying to really prepare for that. So that's why we're asking for this information from you all. So next slide. So what are the current public health protocols? Because they have adjusted a little bit. And this is what will happen when kids return to campus. So we're talking about physical distancing, 6 feet between students and staff, outdoor learning when possible, having our HVAC systems optimized so that they're bringing in fresh air. We have doors or windows propped open. We're in the process of installing MERV 13, which are very powerful, if you will, HEPA filters that might provide some sort of support for reducing COVID-19 transmission. Probably looking at lunch in classrooms or classroom cohorts. We're still figuring that piece out right now. But really the idea is that the kids stay 6 feet apart from one another, but they're in a group and they stay in that group as much as possible. Face coverings will be required for all adults in 3rd through 12th graders. If your child has a medical waiver need, there's a student study team process that we'll be advertising that they would go through. And really what we're trying to do is document what other supports we could put in place. Is that they're going to wear like one of those plexiglass, that's not plexiglass, but the shields, the face shields with the little skirt under it? Or are they going to do distance learning, or what are they going to do? Because we want to make sure we can help the student and the school stay safe. In terms of illness procedures, Sacramento County is doing the daily screen at home. We might do some temperature checks on campus as well. Everyone has to stay home when sick. If you are symptomatic, you're going to be immediately sent home. We'll call every relative on the emergency card looking for someone to pick them up. And then in terms of like what happens when there's a positive case, I have a little chart coming. We'll talk about it more, but just know in a nutshell, we're going to be working with county public health, and there will be some notifications and some potential closures. And anytime more than 5% of the campus is testing positive or is closed, that then means that the school will actually go into a 14-day closure at that point. So next slide, Amanda. So how will cases be handled on campus? So this is actually a chart straight from Sacramento County Public Health. This is what every school in Sacramento County is going to be doing. So you see there's basically 4 scenarios. Like, what if there's a symptomatic person on campus? What if there's someone who's had close exposure? What if there's a test positive? What if there's someone who's been quarantined but they have a negative result? So if someone is symptomatic on campus, let's say a kid comes to school and has a temperature, what we're going to do is we're just basically going to send them home as soon as possible. They have to stay home for 72 hours until the symptoms have resolved for 72 hours without any medication. But the cohort, the classroom, or the group of students that they're a part of remains open. If there's a close exposure, so let's say I'm positive in my son's class, my son is not necessarily testing positive, but he has been exposed to me being positive. The idea is that he needs to stay home for more than likely up to 14 days. County Public Health will advise us on specific steps, and we'll be working with that family on making sure that they're all getting tested. The cohort itself, though, will continue to remain open. So in terms of talking about cohorts closing or the school closing, it's really when individuals who are on our campus start testing positive. So if a teacher tests positive or a student tests positive, that's when then that cohort is going to go home. So typically at Leading Edge, a cohort is, think of it as the students and staff members your student works with on a regular basis. So that could be 4 periods of students or 7 periods of students, depending a little bit on the grade level of your child. So one of the things we're looking at right now is, are there different ways that we can reduce cohorts while still having our instructional and programming stay intact? When someone in that cohort tests positive, so a student in Ms. Sanchez's first period class tests positive, that whole cohort of students goes home for 14 days. And they transition to distance learning. And actually, I should mention that anytime talking about students going home, we're talking about transitioning back to distance learning. We will notify everyone in the cohort, hey, someone in this class has tested positive, and encourage everyone to go get tested. And then we'll work with public health on any potential next steps. And then the last one is, we may have reasons where, because of the 3 scenarios above, someone is quarantined for a period of time and they go out and get tested and they said, but hey, I have a negative test. Can I come back to school? The reality is, no, you can't. You actually must stay home until you've gone through your full 14-day quarantine period. So it's a lot of technical detail, and I understand it might be flying over people's heads a little bit, and I completely understand that. But what I really want every parent to walk away with are 2 things. One, to keep our schools open is really going to take all of us working together. And so when a child is symptomatic in any way, shape, or form, whether it's COVID or something else, they really need to stay home and attend school via distance learning until there's resolution with whatever those symptoms are. The other piece is that at any moment, any given time, families should be prepared for their children to have to transition back to distance learning. We certainly hope that we can minimize those to the greatest extent possible. But if we look at what has been happening in other K-12 schools across the United States, this is a reality that we have to prepare for simultaneously. So Daniel asked, how would the school know if a student has COVID-19? And Ms. Goldman responded with, first, yes, public health would let us know. But also, we hope that you will let us know if that's your child, because while we do get notifications from public health, they probably take 24 to 48 hours after the result has ended up there, which may be 24 to 48 hours after you actually got the results yourself. So if families could partner with us and let us know, all of the information is certainly kept confidential. I do want you to know that, but that's what actually will allow us to react in the most timely manner to support all of the students and families in our community. And I think that's the big thing, is that everyone on this call and in our communities realize we really have to work together as a community to keep our school open. Next slide.
Can I add something to that, Dr. Wood?
Yeah.
So I have experienced this now as a parent. My child has been back in preschool for about a month now. And, 2 weeks in, we got the email saying a student in your child's class has been in contact with an individual who may have been exposed to COVID, right? Not even like for sure, like may have.
So it's the close exposure one, row 2.
And then of course they don't tell us who the person is. That is confidential. And then they say that, this person is staying off campus for the next X number of days. The last day they were on campus was this day. And then, we have to decide, okay, do we feel what the school remains open, the cohort remains open. And then about 5 days later, we got a follow-up email. Everyone in the household has tested negative. Everybody's good to go on. But should they have gotten the opposite response, like, okay, everybody in this family, has tested positive, one of these other scenarios may have been in play. And that's sort of what that looked like from a parent's perspective.
So we know this is a lot of information on this one, but it's important information. Are there any questions before we move on to the next slide? I don't see anything in the chat. I just want to double check. Okay, good. All right, so moving on to the next slide. So what is hybrid going to look like? So what we're currently planning for is the model that we talked about earlier this summer. It's what we're calling the double days model. The idea is that students are in one of 3 cohorts. So first, there's 2 in-person cohorts. There's a cohort A and a cohort B. So students that are in cohort A come to school on Mondays and Tuesdays. They learn from home the remainder of the week. Cohort B students come to school on Thursday and Friday and learn from home the remainder of the week. And then that last cohort, the 3rd cohort, is the students that are signing up for extended distance learning. So these are people that are just for either the rest of the semester or the rest of the trimester are saying, you know what, we don't want to risk it. We're just going to learn from home with distance learning. As of this afternoon, Leading Edge had about 30% of families that had responded to our survey saying that at least from now through the beginning of January, they're planning on extended distance learning. So we'll have some number. Part of why we're asking this question in the survey right now is we're not asking you to sign up for a shift or ask you to sign up for extended distance learning because your opinions may change on this. But we're trying to just get a rough assessment of how many kids are we talking about in each of these groups, because that may help us then figure out around staffing. Do we want to staff ourselves a little bit different if half the kids, let's say, are doing extended distance learning? And so when students are at home, it's kind of like now, where it's going to be a mix of live instruction and independent activities. We are working with our teachers right now, though, on really trying to figure out how we make this model sustainable, because realize right now teachers only have one group of students they have to work with, the students that are on the Zoom call, right? And so when we go to this hybrid model, a teacher will have maybe 15 students in their classroom and then another 15 students on the Zoom call. And they can't really monitor both things simultaneously. So we're trying to think through what's the best way to still make sure that at-home kids are getting support, but making sure that the teacher can focus on the students in the classroom that are in front of him or her. I saw there was a question about daily temperature checks. So in Sacramento County, that is part of the Screen at Home campaign. We're asking all families to take temperatures at home. We might, just to get kids used to the process for the first couple of weeks, we're talking about doing screenings or temperature screenings when they come on campus. But realistically, realize the Black Rock campus, between VLA and Leading Edge, we're talking about 500 students entering campus every day. So trying to take 500 students' temperatures might be next to impossible. Also, the other reason why Screen at Home is important, but it's not the only thing we're thinking about, is that up to 50% of COVID-19 cases can actually be asymptomatic cases where someone won't be running a temperature or demonstrating symptoms. So there's kind of both pieces to that. Okay, so that's the explain of the hybrid model. If a teacher gets the virus, will he or she conduct distance teaching from home? Yes, so that actually has like a 2-part answer. So yes, assuming they themselves are not ill. So, remember, some of us can get COVID-19 and be basically perfectly fine. We just know because we got tested. Whereas other people are going to be symptomatic. When people are symptomatic and they're having symptoms of COVID-19, they actually may be too ill to actually teach. So in that case, we would probably have a substitute teacher doing distance learning. So we're working on developing kind of a cadre of teachers that we can rely on as our substitute teachers. And we've actually created an absence reporting system where when teachers go in to report an absence related to COVID-19, they can elect whether or not they're going to need a substitute based on the conditions. All right, so that was the hybrid schedule. And then what are we thinking instruction's actually going to look like? So I kind of hinted at this when I was talking about teachers having to support multiple groups. So what we're thinking is, so imagine a class period here for a moment. So think of a math lesson that someone's teaching. What we're kind of thinking is that at the beginning of the period, there would be whole group instruction that is all, let's say, 30 students together. Some are in the classroom, some are online via video conference. But the teacher is able to teach the lesson through the computer in such a way that the kids can see it at home on their Chromebooks, and the kids in the classroom can see it on the LCD projector that's being displayed. When then, let's say you're done with your math lesson, you're going to go to independent practice. That's actually probably when the Zoom call would stop for the students that are at home, and the students that are at home would really work independently. And then what would happen at the end of the period is the teacher might start a new Zoom call, just checking in with everyone, how's it going? But really the distance learning support would be getting, the distance learning students, would be getting their individualized support after school. So we're looking at building in office hours every single day. We have office hours now, but looking at how we might need to refine that, so that then, if you got stuck on a math problem, you can check in with your distance learning teacher. Also, remember, if you're in a hybrid, if you're on one of the hybrid shifts, you're going to be coming to class someday that week. So that might be another time that you're able to check in with the teacher if you got stuck on something. I think next slide. All right, so I think that was my last slide. Back to you, Ms. Golden.
So there was a lot there. Let's like take a moment. What questions do we have? And I encourage you to feel free to unmute and ask of the group, because you know that the next thing is I'm going to ask you questions.
So I'll volunteer.
Thank you.
In thinking about like the safety precautions you guys are taking, do the teachers need anything? Like, do they have everything that they need? Because I mean, I feel like we've all heard that, obviously adults and older people are more susceptible, and the idea that they wouldn't have anything, I don't know if there's something parents need to do to support it.
I'm going to give the official answer, and then I think Amanda's going to have another answer. So I will say that, as a school, we have been well supplied through both the county and our own purchasing related to PPE equipment. So we have masks, we have hand sanitizer, we have plexiglass barriers, we have face shields. We're installing those MERV 13 HEPA filters in all of the classrooms. I would say that there could be other requests that we come up with down the road. Let us get closer to actually having kids back on campus and getting things sort of accounted for and stuff. But at this point, I feel like we're pretty well equipped. I think that the things that the teachers are going to need more than anything else is honestly patience and understanding, and letting them know that it's okay. Like, we're happy that you can work with our kids at all. So, we're in this together. And also trust, honestly, I'll be really frank. A lot of our teachers are very scared about returning to school because they've been teachers for 20 years and we've seen sick kids come to school. And, we've had stories of kids saying, yeah, I had a fever today, but my mom told me not to tell you. I mean, it's something that really happens as an educator. And so I think, one of the things that we have to work on as a community is really making sure that we're communicating to everyone that we're really taking care of each other, because that's what A, is going to actually be able to keep us open, but B, help us build some trust as an educational community.
Yeah, I mean, that is more or less what I was going to say. I'm going to add a couple of things. I'm going to go back to one of my earlier slides. So this slide right here, I actually think is really an important answer to this question. And I know it's sort of a weird thing. This is talking about, how are we as parents supporting each other? So on Wednesdays, when we have independent learning, teachers get about 100 emails from your children. And that's okay. Like, that's fine. That's totally fine. But if and whenever possible, we're able to like make that 99 by saying, you know what, instead of emailing the teacher right now, I'm going to like text my phone a friend buddy and see if they know the answer to this question before, that's actually super supportive and helpful, because we're just trying to like, there's a lot, right? And so if there's a way that we as parent community can support each other so that the teachers don't need to support us so much, they need to support themselves and the kids, that's really, really helpful. Similarly, there's always going to be stuff, right? So like our budget this year is going more towards tech and subscriptions and stuff like that. So there might be that day when, Miss Meindl says, oh my goodness, I realized that, we used to have like 6 sets of crayons, but we actually need like 26 now. That's when I'm going to send an all call to you all, like, who can help us with these sorts of little things, because obviously those will certainly come up. But I think Dr. Wood said it well: grace, love, patience, and a strong community. And I mean, and I want to say we're seeing that from our parent community right now, and I'm so grateful for it. And for sure, that's something that
and then this I think is kind of obvious, but I'll point it out. It's making sure that your kids are comfortable with the normal COVID-19 protocols that we're all living with today. They are comfortable wearing masks. They're comfortable being able to communicate through that mask, and helping them understand. We're going to be putting out some videos and some materials. So kids can see what school's really going to look like, but helping them understand that it isn't going to be school as normal or school as pre-COVID, and that's okay. That we're going to get through this together, and it's going to look a little different, and that's going to be our work moving forward. Eric posted, what precautions are being put in place. So, we will be setting up the classrooms so that students are doing the 6-foot physical distancing. We don't have tables anymore. We actually have desks that we've purchased. We've removed most of the flexible furniture, like we had couches and beanbag chairs and that sort of thing. All of that has actually been removed from the classroom. So it'll be kind of more traditional desks and chairs separated 6 feet apart. We'll have hand sanitizers, or hand sanitizing stations when they walk into the classrooms. There's additional hand washing stations that are being purchased and implemented. We'll be working with all students on making sure that they have their masks on. We'll be providing masks. And then, doing training with the students, both before they come onto campus. There'll be some training videos and stuff, but also once they get here. That actually literally might be the first week, is we're just really working on protocols of, how do we act in this COVID space. And then Daniel, I guess you could do an outdoor shower, but I do know, I talk to the county public health office every Friday. And, as they are understanding how this virus is transmitted more and more, they just keep saying this. If we could just get everyone to do this, a lot of this would go away, the more they're understanding it. Fogging classrooms.
Daniel, with my grubby preschooler, I do that anyway, like all the time, COVID or no COVID, like just strip him down outside and hose him down. It's gross in preschool. I think our middle schoolers are a little better than that. Though I don't know, they won't be changing for PE, so you might need an outdoor shower for that.
We probably will not. This is Kim asked a question in terms of fogging classrooms. At this point, no, we will not be fogging classrooms, largely because we actually have a lot of students and staff that are allergic to the sanitizer. We have to be kind of careful with that. We learned, gosh, it wasn't COVID, it was another illness, but we had strep throat, something, that, we actually have to do the sanitizing of spraying everything down with sanitizer the night before students are going to return, or we have some students and teachers having asthmatic reactions. But we are looking at, ways that, shared spaces might be wiped down with like a Clorox wipe or that sort of thing. Yes, parents will have the option of keeping their kids at home full distance learning for indefinitely for this school year. We're looking at trying to create not a year-long sign-up process. The schools that have done that have all told us they regretted it because parents change their minds, that you find out it doesn't work so well. So we're looking at probably a grading period specific sign-up process. So in leading edge's case, signing up by trimester. Testing is not really a backlog anymore. So I'm a little bit of a freaker outer, and I get tested every 2 to 3 weeks, have been since April. I'm like the biggest proponent of COVID testing. You can ask any of our staff members, they are annoyed with it. And so I actually, because I'm also just nerdy like that, I have a spreadsheet of how many days it's taken between when I get a test and when I get a results. And I will say the last 6 weeks that I've been getting tested, the last 3 testing cycles that I've been through, all of the results have come back in 24 to 48 hours, one time even less than 24 hours. So the backlog seems to be getting fixed. And we're hearing the same thing from public health. Also in Sacramento County public health, so all of the schools, as they reopen, the staff has to participate in surveillance testing. And so Sacramento County Public Health has opened new testing just specifically for educators and school site employees. So that's helping with a little bit of the backlog as well. What is the advice of county providing testing? So if, we do have to wait on results coming back quickly. I did ask our public health officer on Friday, is there any chance that you might come to us and say, I need all schools to close? And at first she said, well, no. And I kind of teased her. I'm getting it over. I'm like, really think about that. And she said, like the only time I could think of that is if it's going to be as part of a larger county-wide shelter in place, which might be, maybe hospitals are experiencing extreme capacity because of COVID and flu simultaneously, or, running into testing issues or that sort of thing. But they really feel like they have the capacity with some of the new purchases that the governor's office has made to really, build out testing capacity. And at least as an individual, I've seen that as well.
Daniel asked the same question about what do we need from parents, and like we said earlier, I think we're still figuring that out. Yeah. I guess what I would say is each week when I send those weekly updates, there's a little like if you do nothing else, do this section. I think it's in green at the bottom. If you are reading that and responding to it every week, that is really a big thing that we need from you. That's where you're going to see things like, here's this survey and I really need the data from it. And I mean, this week is a exception because I sent out the survey on Monday, but we definitely, like, right now, this exact moment, we need information from you all. And then probably next week we'll need something else, but we will definitely ask. And then, as Dr. Wood said, and I just echo, really the biggest thing is patience and communication, and you guys are doing a fantastic job with that. So we appreciate it. And if you don't know where that survey is, it's right here. I have to do something to grab it. Hang on. So let me ask of the group, are there other are there other okay, let me pause and think and then try to speak. In this group, have folks had a chance to fill out the survey? Are there questions about the survey that we need to go through? Would it be helpful for me to open up the survey right now and just take a look at it so that you guys can see it and see if you have any questions about it? Melissa feels good about the survey. Okay, Daniel says, let's go over the questions. Let's go over the questions. So let's see, I'm gonna stop sharing for a second. And I'm going to open an incognito window because otherwise if I open it, you guys will just see all my editing rights. And I'm gonna.
Do you want me to share?
Sure, why don't you do that?
Make sure I just get the right tab. All right, here we go. All right, so the first question I already answered, that was put in your email address. I think that one's pretty straightforward. But so we're on the second page, Ms. Goldman, about just hybrid planning. So do you want to talk through these questions?
Yeah, so these first couple questions just ask you kind of, what are you thinking about? Like, what are you excited for? What are you worried about? What's the most challenging thing that you anticipate? What do you think a benefit will be? So really, there's no wrong answer. And then, how much notice do you need in terms of getting your childcare situation sorted or changed, in terms of getting yourself mentally prepared, in terms of, whatever piece that is, and we give you a couple choices there. And then we ask you, what's your affiliation with Leading Edge? Almost all of you are parents, though if you happen to also be a teacher or staff member, you can fill that out as well. And then it's going to ask you to go from there. And I'm going to let somebody in. And then it asks you some specific questions. So what grade is your student in? And if you have multiple students in multiple grades, there's an option for that. The next two questions are actually not about hybrid. They're from our student services team. They want some ideas on how they can support you as parents. And so it just asks you, what are you interested in hearing from them? And then we get back into the hybrid questions. So the first question asks, if we were basically making this decision tomorrow from now until winter break, would you choose to have your student participate in hybrid learning where they're coming to campus 2 days a week, or extended distance learning where they're continuing distance learning much in the same way it looks like now? And again, this is not our way of asking you, to make a decision right now, but to just tell us what you're thinking. Sorry, my dog walked in. I got distracted. If you selected hybrid, which shift are you most likely to choose? The Monday, Tuesday shift or the Thursday, Friday shift? Or you know what? We don't care. Just make it work. And then there's some like logistical pieces, like if space were available, would you want your kid to come all 4 days, recognizing that would mean exposure to both groups of kids? At first I thought, who would ever say no to that question? And then I realized what that meant. And then we ask you, do you have children at another academy, Star Academy or PFAA, that you want us to coordinate with? And again, you're not choosing right now, you're just giving us that information. And then I've asked you two questions, which I know are really hard to answer, but they're actually the ones that I need in terms of figuring out What are we doing with the schedule and what are we doing with instruction? And I've asked you to prioritize your top 2 priorities in these 2 areas. Maximizing in-class academic time. So basically like the length of the class period. Do you want us to maximize like what we're doing in that class period and kind of that whole group instruction piece? Do you think it would be more beneficial for your student and your family for us to really maximize those opportunities for socialization, extracurriculars, etc.? So for example, we only have 11 teachers, right? If they're teaching all day, it's really hard to do that after school club, virtual or otherwise. But if we shorten the teaching day a little bit and we can maybe have some of those extracurriculars, like it's all give and take. And then the last one is ensuring opportunity for small group or individualized support. So you don't have to know the logistics of how I make those things happen. But just, when you think about those things, which feels priority-ish to you? Okay, there's a couple questions that are coming up that I can't see yet. Hold on. Sandy said, yeah, okay, great. I'm glad we, thank you for clarifying. Daniel said, what are your assessments of our students after 6 weeks of learning? Do you mean like, how do I think they're doing, Daniel? Or do you mean like what?
Yes. After 6 weeks of being gone, you think that are they doing great? Are they doing terrible? Are they,
yeah, I mean, they're doing as well as could possibly be expected. So you guys know I sent that survey out to you all at the end of August, which had a lot of questions about like, how are you feeling? I asked the kids the same question, and our leading edge kids are amazing in this respect. A lot of them said, a handful of times a week, I feel pretty bad. And a handful of times a week, I feel pretty good. Which in some ways is exactly how they behave when we see them at school in person. They are teenagers, right? They move around. Academically, they're trying their best. There's obviously a handful of kids that really, really struggle in the setting, but we see that you are supporting them, and we are getting more and more creative with how we support them. So I think that they are doing well. Manjot says, in comparison to a normal year, give me about another week. And I'm sort of we just finished the mid-trimester, so I have to look at the data and see how it compares to a normal year. Certainly they are not doing better than in a normal year. Like, I'm not going to pretend to like gaslight, like, oh, they're doing fantastic. But really, I would say they're doing as well as can be expected.
Can I add one little piece to that?
Yeah.
So I know in talking to other middle school administrators and teachers, not necessarily at Natomas Charter or even in Natomas, I think leading edge students as a whole they've adjusted to this transition better. And I think that speaks to having very supportive families, very supportive teachers. Many of the tools that we're using are tools that we've used before, so it's not like it was completely out of left field. Certainly though, they are adolescent middle schoolers, and part of that, time frame in life is being with your friends because you're trying to figure out what your identity is a little bit. And so, I think there are some definite like social emotional parts that have been challenging, especially if it's a child that maybe doesn't have any siblings or is in a neighborhood situation where they're really not seeing any other children. That can be like a little bit challenging.
So there's 2 questions in here. One I want to answer, one I'm going to hold for a minute, and I'm going to finish going over this. So one was, I feel like that first page was a little biased, and I hear that. I want to be really clear. Dr. Wood and I do not want you to send your child back if you are not comfortable sending your child back. That is why we are providing that extended distance learning option. And when I talk with teachers, we are really trying to plan for hybrid learning in such a way that those kids who are doing extended distance learning will not lose out. Like, that's very, very important to us. That, no matter which track A, B, or C kids are on, that they're having the same, as similar of an experience as possible. That being said, there is going to be a point at which we have to go to hybrid, whether we like it or not. And whether we like it or not, Dr. Wood and I don't actually get to make that part of the decision. So we really want to know your thoughts. And if your thoughts are, I don't like this, I don't want it, that's a fair thought. You're totally allowed to feel that way and share that with us. And we appreciate your honesty.
I had one other little piece to that too.
Uh-huh.
Remember, Leading Edge is a site-based program. So by default, we have to assume that everyone is going to do hybrid because every family signed up for an in-person instructional experience. So as we make our hybrid plans, we do have to make them with the potential that 100% of Leading Edge students are going to choose the hybrid option. But this is why we're asking for this data now, is it kind of helps us figure out like, well, actually, maybe it's more like 70% are going to choose that. And if there's some tweaks we can make to be more supportive of the extended distance learning kids, we can do that.
So in 1 minute, Dr. Wood, I'm going to ask you to answer Eric's question about is NCS inclined to go to hybrid as soon as we get the green light, or just wait, let's get through the year and wait till January? I'm going to let you think about that one.
Okay, real quick, sorry. Hi, this is
hi.
Annette. I have a question.
Uh-huh.
It's kind of, okay, so single mom, and I really don't get, by the time I get home from work in the evenings on the weekday, completely, Zachary's already burned out because of the day and what's going on. And then myself, to sit down to, go over work with them, it's very difficult to do. So we're working on weekends on stuff. So I can't work on with him, during the day. Like, let's say the teacher says, go ahead and work on this. And then now he's supposed to have his own time, or even when he's done between that time, like homework time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the weekend is only the time that I really only have to work with him and whatever's been going on, and trying to help him to get acclimated to this whole system. Because at times maybe he's like, I thought I clicked on that, or I thought I did it, but I wasn't aware of this and I wasn't aware of that. So we're still having that whole going back and forth thing. And so I want to know, is there any way to find out, like, okay, like ranking how your child is doing in the class with everybody else? Are other children having this same issue, turning in the work or not turning it in? And then I guess when we get the results back from their assessments, that will be good, because that'll help us at least know where they're at in regards to that. And you have specialized training. But I really don't want, because this is a whole new thing and he doesn't have siblings and he's home, there's a lot that's just going on. But so is that being taken into, all his teachers, I think, has been great. They've been working with me and stuff like that. When we finish, we email and then they go back and they're whatever. But is this how this is going to continue to go on? Or at some point in time, is that, going to stop because, okay, we've been in school long enough now, so we're not doing this anymore? I just, this is just very, we spend so much time.
I hear you.
Sorry.
Doctor, will you stop screen sharing for a second? Because I want everybody to get to see my face for a minute. So I really hear what you're saying, Annette, and I part of me wishes I had a crystal ball and I could tell you. But here's what I can tell you, because I've been working with these middle schoolers for 7 years and I worked with high schoolers for almost a decade before that. A lot of what our sixth graders are experiencing, and I believe your kiddo is a sixth grader, is as much a product of being a sixth grader as it is of this distance learning situation. And I know we have some parents of older students on here who can possibly attest that our sixth graders are kind of a disaster first trimester every year, because there's so much to get used to. And certainly we work with them, and it just takes a little time. That being said, where we're at right now in this halfway point of the trimester, is where we're kind of looking at, okay, where are we at? What do we need to do to continue to make these systems better? And that's definitely something we're working on. I don't think the level that you're experiencing will continue all year. And if it does, or not if it does, because it's not gonna, but if we get closer to the end of this trimester ends November 6th, and you're still in this situation, that's when you and I, or any of you and I, are going to have a talk about, let's sit down and have an SST and figure out what we can do to make this better, because that's, that's what we do. Right now, I open this up to anybody. Email me, set up a time. We'll set up a 15-minute call. We'll find a time on your lunch or at night or sometime. And And that question of like, how is my kid really doing? I'll tell you. I'll be very frank with you. I can't obviously tell you in this setting live on YouTube and
Oh, of
without,
course, yeah.
but you know, I'm happy to sit down and have that conversation with you. But my general rule of thumb is right now, number one, is your child healthy and happy and fed? Great. Good job. Number two, are they getting like some of their learning done? You know, some amount. And honestly, that's a pretty big deal too. And beyond that, the rest we can work on. I know it is super hard and super, super difficult. But the kids are really doing a great job. I know you guys are doing a great job. I do think it will get better.
You also have parent-teacher conferences coming up the
first week of October. We have parent-teacher conferences on for all sixth graders, and then some amount of seventh and eighth graders, depending on need. It's a little bit different.
It's the first week in November, right? I think you said
it's
October.
the first week in November.
Yeah. We have that coming up as well.
All right, so we're going to keep answering questions, because by all means we're here to keep answering your questions. But some of you are like, oh no, I need to go make dinner. Go make dinner. It's fine. Remember, we're recording this on YouTube. So there were a few questions I want to go back to. Let's start with Eric's question. Yeah. Joe, do you want to answer that one?
Eric and Sandy's questions kind of simultaneously. So I'll start with Sandy and then go to Eric. So Sandy asked a little bit about A and B groups changing over time. At this point, kind of like signing up for extended distance learning, we're thinking that we're going to attach that to the grading period. So you sign up for your shift during a particular grading period. I know every student's like, can I be with my friends? And we are prioritizing siblings or other household members first. And then it may sort of shake out at that point that they can actually be with their friends. So then going to Eric. So Eric asked the $25,000 question right now, like, when exactly are we going to go to hybrid? And that's actually like a really great question. So the first thing I just want to give everyone the context of, I think if I were an outsider listening to this, I would have an assumption that the Sacramento County Public Health regularly consults with the educational leaders across the county and says, hey, here's what we think is going to happen. It's not actually what happens. So we're all kind of reading crystal balls right now. And honestly, I sometimes have to email them like, do you think it's going to be this date? Do you think it's going to be this date? So we're a little not sure when this transition is going to actually happen. Our inclination is not to immediately run out the door and shift to hybrid. One, we want to make sure that we have all of our health and safety protocols in place, because remember, our goal is to reopen and stay open. That being said, we also know distance learning does not work well for all kids. And we feel like we have an ethical and moral responsibility to try to get to hybrid in some sort of timely manner. And so, as we've been sort of talking about it as an administrative team, we all kind of agreed that we don't, if let's say it's mid-October is when you can go, we're probably not going to open in mid-October because we have some things we need to put in place. But we don't feel completely comfortable punting to January either, because we do recognize that there are kids that need this support. And so we're trying to develop a timeline where we can transition to hybrid in a reasonable manner, have all of the things in place that we need to have in place, but also for the families that don't feel comfortable with transitioning to hybrid, that they do have that option of staying with extended distance learning and then choosing to maybe go to hybrid later in the year. Because we recognize every family's in a little bit different space when it comes to COVID, based on your own personal feelings and beliefs about it, but also health issues that may be going on. Maybe a parent is, has a chronic health condition, or even the student themselves does. And so we're trying to provide a degree of flexibility there for families, but while also making sure all of the students are fully supported to the greatest extent possible.
So there were a couple questions in the chat that came privately to me that I want to answer for everybody, but the askers asked to remain anonymous. So one question was just about the logistics of a hybrid schedule, the way we have some periods on one day and some periods on the other. Would that continue? And it would, because it, as weird as it is, remember their most important classes, their core instruction, they actually have 2 periods of, so they still end up having like English every day and math every day. But like their electives, they would have every other day. And our thinking about that is twofold. Number one, transitions are going to be tough in hybrid. Every time you come in and out of a room, you have to worry about like, am I washing this thing? Am I wiping down this thing? Am I washing my hands? Who did I see out in the hallway? And so we really do want to limit transition. So our block schedule for this year was designed with that in mind. And honestly, then the combination of like some kids are on the Zoom and some kids are in the room, instruction is happening a little slower than maybe we normally would. And so that's a reality why we like our longer block periods. And then the question got asked again, like, if we choose extended distance learning now, can we choose hybrid later? And the answer is yes. Really, definitely we're going to give you like choose from now until this, from now until this, from now until this. And then if there's something that comes up, we're going to be flexible because ultimately we're a school. Teaching kids is what we do. Any other thoughts or questions? So we really want to thank you guys for being here. Really want to encourage everybody to fill out the survey if you haven't already. Any other thoughts that you want to say, Dr. Wood? In a minute, I'll end the live stream. So if you have any offline questions, we can answer those.
I just want to actually amplify both Sandy and Eric. So yes, I think the mantra of 2020 is be flexible and be kind and wear your mask. And Eric, I appreciate you understanding that in some situations, all schools right now are kind of in some impossible situations, and we're just making the best decisions that we can. And we appreciate having all of you on this journey with us and having that understanding, but also having your input and feedback because it's our first global pandemic as well. And it really kind of takes us collectively all together, exchanging and sharing ideas to figure out how we can best serve all of our kids.
So we're going to sign off in 1 second. There is one question in the chat that I do want to answer and then log off, but it's about our kids getting tested before starting hybrid. That's not a choice that we can make. That is a choice that you as parents might make. And the other choice that you as parents might make that, we don't usually do a lot of preaching about your health decisions, but we're going to preach about one thing this year. Please, please, please get your flu shot and have your kids get their flu shot this year, because you know what we really don't need? A major, terrible flu year on top of COVID. Like I said, I'm not one to everybody's health decisions are their own, but please, pretty please, that's my ask there.
I went yesterday, in and out in 2 minutes. It was easy. So.
All right, I'm going to end the live stream, and then if you had any other